Hello everyone and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The taste of salt and rage was still on Steffy Forrester's lips as she boarded the flight from Monaco. Somewhere in Finn's palm was the wedding ring she had torn from her finger, a chilly, meaningless circle of metal. When the ground moved beneath Steffy's feet, Sheila's smug, unavoidable face continued to appear behind her closed eyes. The first tumbler of cognac had already burnt its way down her throat by the time the jet engines screamed to life. The second and third had joined the aircraft by the time it leveled out over the Pacific. She couldn't recall the landing. All she could recall was the weight of the vacant seat next to her and the constant trembling in her hands. That evening, Carter Walton had not anticipated company. Daphne's ring remained like an accusation on the corner of his desk. It had been a mistake to come to Los Angeles, she had stated with a scary calm. It had been a mistake to fall in love with him. Somehow, the biggest error of all was starting a life with a man who had been waiting 13 years for a family. After that, she left with her passport in hand, her suitcase packed, and her destination set for Paris. Long after the building had been cleared out, Carter had been sitting in the CEO's office of Forrester Creations, gazing at the city lights without actually seeing them. From the bottom drawer had emerged a bottle of something pricey and amber. He hadn't bothered to get a glass. He initially believed he was dreaming when the door opened at 1:30 in the morning. Steffi stood there with her hair disheveled and her eyes blurry and red-rimmed, still dressed as she had been on the journey. She gazed at him as though she had followed the sound of someone else's sadness across the city after swaying once and catching herself on the doorframe. "Carter," she uttered, her voice breaking on the one syllable. Before he knew it, he was standing. "Steffi." "What the hell?" She raised a hand and said. "Don't. Just don't ask me how I'm doing. I'm not. Neither are you." Her eyes strayed to the bottle, the abandoned ring, and the way his tie hung loosely around his neck like a noose he had neglected to tighten. "Look at you." It wasn't a question. Daphne left. Carter gave one nod. The ensuing quiet was more burdensome than the hour. Steffi stumbled across the room and sank into the chair across from his desk. Without asking, she reached for the bottle. He didn't stop her. Two people who had spent years circling each other in boardrooms and family meals, now reduced to the raw nerve of simultaneous breakdown, passed it back and forth in the dim light. She gave him scraps of information about Monaco. Finn's expression upon tossing the ring. Sheila had looked like a curse that would not go away. Unaware that their parents' marriage had broken down on foreign land, the children were waiting at home. Carter listened without interjecting, then delivered his own devastation in return. Daphne's diagnosis, the subtle way their brief marriage had been devoid of hope, and the unique anguish of desiring a child above all else and witnessing the potential leave with a one-way ticket. The gap between their chairs vanished between the third and fourth swallows. When she listed sideways, Carter's palm reached her shoulder, only to stabilize her. Steffi's fingers gripped his wrist tightly. The only sounds in the office were the faint sounds of traffic from the boulevard below and the far-off hum of the building's air conditioning. Everything else seemed optional when one was grieving. Authorization. "I apologize." Necessity. What transpired thereafter was not discussed. Boundaries that had already been dissolved were not carefully negotiated or declared. Steffi's tongue tasted like salt and cognac. Carter's hands were cautious at first, then less so. Her back felt chilly against the desk. The ceiling was covered in shifting patterns created by the city lights. They didn't think about Finn, Daphne, the kids, the firm, or the 1,000 reasons this was the worst idea they had ever had for a little while. The only thing that knew the precise form of the void they were attempting to fill was the heat of another body. The bottle was empty between them as they sat on the floor with their backs to the desk, their garments partially put back together. Carter's shoulder held Steffi's head. They didn't provide an apology. The night was still too raw for that kind of clarity, and offering an apology would have meant acknowledging that they had done something that demanded forgiveness. Eventually, Steffi replied in a raspy voice, "This doesn't change anything." Carter gazed at the distant wall. I am still married, I said. Technically I am. Technically. She gave a single broken laugh. Yeah. We're disasters. He sighed. We are. With careful distance re-established, they parted before morning. As if heat alone could erase the memory of another man's touch, Steffi got a car service home and stood under a hot shower until the water turned cold. Carter was sleeping on his office couch when he woke up to the sound of the cleaning team in the corridor. He could already taste sorrow in the back of his throat. On this specific section of the Los Angeles coast, life went on as usual. With the intensity of someone attempting to flee her own thoughts, Steffi immersed herself into her work and the kids. Finn's apologies and explanations upon his return from Monaco only served to widen their gulf. Every day, Sheila's shadow grew longer. Daphne sent Carter a short, official email announcing that she had arrived in Paris and would not be coming back. When his personal life failed him, he pushed himself into the firm in the same manner. Longer hours, sharper focus, fewer words. Weeks went by. Next, a month. Steffi started experiencing nausea upon waking that was unrelated to any lingering sadness. First, she disregarded it. Stress, she told herself. Too much coffee. Insufficient sleep. No amount of resolve could get rid of the bone-deep tiredness and breast soreness she experienced during the second month. On a Thursday afternoon when the kids were with Brooke, she purchased a test, shut herself in her office's restroom, and gazed at the two pink lines until the world shrank to a single deafening stillness. Expecting a child. The timing was cruel. Finn and she hadn't had a sexual relationship since before Monaco. The night she had spent on the floor of Carter Walton's office with cognac on her tongue and anguish in her veins was the only possibility that remained amid the ruins. With a plastic stick remaining in her fingers, Steffi sat on the closed toilet lid for a considerable amount of time. Uninvited memories of past pregnancies surfaced. Hayes, Kelly, the complex web of allegiance and fatherhood that had once almost destroyed everything. She had vowed to stop keeping secrets. I'm done with the specific kind of soap opera anarchy that made love a battlefield. And yet here she came once more, bearing evidence of the universe's cruel sense of humor. First she kept it a secret. Not Finn, who continued to cling to the cautious optimism that they would be able to return. Neither Ridge nor Brooke would have come down with the same amount of worry and condemnation. Not Taylor, whose composed demeanor would have been worse than a lecture. Like a second heartbeat, the secret was constant and unavoidable in her body. Before she could say anything, Carter saw the shift. One of the things that made him deadly in a boardroom was that he had always been perceptive. Steffi's avoidance of the coffee station. The way she put her palm to her stomach and left meetings early. Every time they were by themselves in a room, her gaze would drift from his. He discovered her in the design studio one evening after the last employee had left, gazing at a partially completed sketch as though it contained the answers. Steffi. She didn't raise her head. You're pregnant, she said, snapping the pencil between her fingers. Not tonight, Carter. The silence was dense and accusing. At last, she put down the shattered pieces and looked him in the eyes. Yes. He took in the word in the same manner that he took in unfavorable news during a negotiation. Still exact, already calculating the repercussions. Finn's. She gave one shake of her head. Felt like a final action. Carter shut his eyes. Something complex moved behind them when he opened them again. There was shock, of course, but there was also a glimpse of something that appeared perilously like to amazement. He had desired a child of his own for 13 years, and the cosmos had fulfilled his wish in the most disastrous way possible. He muttered, "We need to talk about this." Steffi's voice was steady only because she made it so. "I know. But not in this place." 2 nights later, they met in a peaceful home Carter maintained as a secret haven, far enough from the Logan orbit and the Forrester property to feel secure. Not where anyone can walk in and hear the end of both our marriages in real time. Steffi showed up wearing sunglasses and dark clothing, as though the city may know her and begin to interrogate her. The scent of old books and the subtle citrus of cleaning supplies filled the air within. On the table between the seats, Carter had filled 2 glasses with water and left them unopened. Steffy did not take a seat. The test, the timing, the utter confidence that this child belonged to the night they had both attempted to forget. All of these details came to her as she paced the length of the room. With his fists clutched so firmly that the knuckles were white, Carter listened without interjecting while resting his elbows on his knees. When she was done, the only sound was a night bird's distant call. Steffy ultimately stopped in front of the window and stated, "I want this baby." The city below shimmered like something lovely and unconcerned. "I already adore this infant. However, I am also aware of the effects this will have on everyone. To Finn. To the children. To Daphne should she ever learn." Carter stepped up and said, "To you." The same hazardous voltage that had initially drawn them together was felt in the space between them. "I do need your protection from this, but you don't. The CEO is you. I represent the company. This goes beyond personal matters." "Then we handle it," he said in a calm, low voice. "It's a scandal that could tear Forrester Creations apart from the inside. Together." Silently, Steffi turned and said, "For as long as we can." Her face appeared softer and younger in the dim light, without of the armor she typically wore. "When will we no longer be able to?" Carter's response was straightforward and frightening in its candor. "After that, we are honest." The weeks that followed were a study in meticulous choreography. "And we deal with whatever comes next." Steffi treated her symptoms with the same brutal efficiency that she applied to board battles and fashion weeks. Carter made an effort to stay in the same rooms as her, to see how she was doing without attracting attention, and to provide a reassuring presence when sickness struck or tiredness threatened to overwhelm her. They didn't make contact. The night was never mentioned again. However, the secret lingered between them like a third party in all of their exchanges, glances across a conference table, and late-night texts that only stated, "You okay?" and got the response, "Still standing." Finn saw the gap widening and assumed it was due to lingering resentment over Sheila. He made a greater effort. Brought some flowers. Scheduled peaceful evenings. With a guilt so intense it was like physical anguish, Steffi accepted them. She tried to envision a future where this child belonged to him instead as she lay awake at night, listening to his breath. The duration of the fantasy was seldom more than a few minutes. One afternoon in the Forrester Mansion's kitchen, Brooke cornered her with uncomfortably keen gaze. "You look pale. You're not consuming food. And like a teenager with a secret, you continue to vanish into restrooms." Steffi nearly said, "Talk to me." The words were hard on her teeth. Rather, she forced a grin and told a tale of stress, late nights, and the strain of maintaining the company's stability as everything else collapsed. Although Brooke did not appear to be persuaded, she decided to let it go for the time being. A routine examination that Steffi could no longer put off was the first true problem. With her heart racing, she headed alone to a covert clinic on the opposite side of town. The ultrasound technician was courteous and competent. With a heart already pumping with unwavering purpose, the image on the screen solidified into the distinct shape of a tiny human. Steffi gazed till her vision became fuzzy. She allowed herself one quiet, trembling cry as the technician left the room to give her a moment. She didn't call before driving to Carter's private residence that evening. Wearing pants and a cozy sweater, he opened the door, glanced at her face and moved away. She placed the ultrasound picture on the table in between them. They were silent for a considerable amount of time. At last she said, "It's real." Carter's palm lingered over the picture before lightly resting on the paper's edge as though the picture itself could shatter. "Yes, it is." Years of wanting, witnessing others create the families he had been denied, and thinking the opportunity had eluded him were all visible in his look at that moment. The room was filled with a mixture of thankfulness and fear as he gazed at Steffi. She muttered, "I don't know how to do this. I have no idea how to be the lady who ruins 2 marriages with a single secret." Carter said in a raspy voice, "I don't know how to look my kids in the eye and explain that their world is about to change again because their mother made a mistake in the middle of the night when she was too broken to think straight. It wasn't merely an error. The revelation lingered between them, weighty and final. Not for me. Steffi shut her eyes. The way ahead didn't seem much clearer when she opened them again, but at least she wasn't walking it alone anymore. They started making plans in small steps. Requirements for the disclosure. Legal factors. What part Carter would play after the truth was revealed. Finn might never be able to forgive her. The almost certainty that Daphne would soon hear and experience the knife twist of betrayal once more, no matter where she was in Paris. None of the choices were tidy. They all had the potential to cause long-term harm. Even so, Steffi would feel something fierce and protective rise in response when she rested a hand on the small curvature of her tummy late at night, when the city slept and the weight of the secret was at its heaviest. This child was born among the ruins of 2 marriages, during a time of mutual despair that neither of them had anticipated or desired. However, the infant was not wreckage in and of itself. The child was a possibility. On a canvas already filled with past mistakes and heartbreaks, a fresh tale is just waiting to be written. Carter sensed it as well. He would gaze at her with an intensity that had nothing to do with desire, and everything to do with the future that was developing between them during the quiet times when they were able to steal a few minutes together. This was something he had desired for so long that it still seemed like a dream he may wake up from at any time. The situation was a nightmare. The child's existence wasn't. The pressure increased as the weeks stretched into months, and Steffi's body started to reveal the first subtle signs of what they were concealing. Finn became more adamant. Brooke became more suspicious. Every time Ridge posed a question, it got closer to the truth. Even though their personal lives were in danger of collapsing around the corporation, it persisted in demanding their attention. Steffi eventually uttered the words that had been on her mind for weeks one evening while standing on Carter's house's balcony with the Pacific wind blowing through her hair. Soon we must inform them. Carter nodded. Before someone else discovers the solution and takes the option away from us. Warm and steady. His hand sought hers in the darkness. I'm not going to back down from this, no matter what happens next. Squeezing his fingers, Steffi gazed out at the pitch-black water. From either of you. The repercussions were already mounting off in the distance. Finn, Daphne, the kids, the households, the business. The straightforward, shocking reality that Steffi Forrester was carrying Carter Walton's child was about to crash with everything. She was unsure if they would withstand the impact. All she knew was that the secret had become too big to bear, and that the night they had spent attempting to avoid their pain had given them something neither of them had anticipated. A motivation to deal with whatever lay ahead. The pregnancy test was just the start. The true tale, the one that would change everything, remained untold. Before Steffi Forrester found herself standing in Carter Walton's apartment with a half-empty bottle of whiskey between them, and the kind of silence that only 2 people who had both lost something significant could share, the night had already gone awry. With Sheila Carter's voice still echoing in her ears and the salt air of the Mediterranean still somewhat adhering to her hair, she had left the Forrester home wearing the same clothing she had worn in Monaco. Finn had pled. He had vowed that he was unaware that Sheila would be traveling on that aircraft. This time he had vowed everything was different. Steffi was familiar with those words. She had previously trusted them. She would never trust them again. When she got to Forrester Creations after midnight, Carter was waiting in the executive suite with the lights still on because he had also given up on sleep. Like an accusation, Daphne's wedding ring rested on their kitchen counter. Premature ovarian failure was the clinical term that, for some reason, made the sadness seem less intense. The diagnosis had arrived days earlier. She had sobbed while being hugged by Carter. He had assured them that they would find an alternative. He had been sincere. She then told him she had to return to Paris for a while, giving him the same subdued finality Steffi had just applied to Finn. By myself. Therefore, neither of them pretended that it was anything other than 2 people who had ran out of ways to express their pain when Steffi entered the loft looking as like she had been hollowed out and Carter poured 2 glasses without asking. They had a conversation initially. They did, of course. Steffi told him about the bridge in Monaco, the moment she thought she may truly fall, and how the railing gave way under her weight when she attempted to flee from Sheila. She explained to him how Sheila had pulled her back, how the woman who had attempted to kill her had spared her life, and how everything had somehow gotten worse because of that one act. Carter listened as he usually did, steadily, mindfully, and without the need to make any quick corrections. When it was his turn, he talked about the empty nursery they had begun to envisage, the message that stated Daphne loved him too much to stay and watch him pretend he wasn't disappointed, and the quiet way she had packed a bag while he was at work. The talk stopped being cautious somewhere between the second and third drink. When Steffi went for the bottle, she was too close. Carter's hand stayed on her shoulder longer than was necessary for comfort. Everything they were both unwilling to identify thickened the air between them,